What is going on, everybody? In today's video, we are going to go through a real fantasy football draft that I did this past week. And I'm going to go round by round and tell you one of my favorite players or my absolute favorite player in the first 12 rounds of that fantasy football draft. So we'll be going over why I like those players, why I think you should be targeting them in those specific rounds of your upcoming drafts or mock drafts, and why I think they were the best potential overall value in that specific rounds. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year long. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe down below. Come join the community. If you guys have any fantasy football questions, drop them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Without further ado, let's hop right into today's video. All right, for the first round of this draft, I think there's a lot of good options. I like A.J. Brown going at the end of the first. Gibbs is going to be a great value. Garrett Wilson. I still love Bijan at the 1-6. I think Amon-Ra might outperform his ADP. But, man, I've got to talk about Breece Hall in the first round. I think he has incredible potential to finish as the RB1 on the season. At the end of the day, was the RB2 last year, so I don't think this is in any way, shape, or form crazy to say. I think if you want to go target Breece Hall earlier in the first round, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. You look at going into 2024, a better quarterback play with Aaron Rodgers healthy. You're going to get better wide receiver and tight end, overall better pass catching play because Aaron Rodgers is healthy. Going to see this team in the red zone more, perform better as an actual offense in comparison to what we got at quarterback last year. Let's not even talk about it. And that's going to mean a better overall season for Breece Hall, more red zone opportunities, more touchdowns. And you look at what he was able to do last year, 9 total touchdowns, 591 receiving yards off of 76 receptions. All of this should improve. His upside is massive. Looking at where he's going in the first round, and not to mention the Jets offensive line got better in the offseason as well. So nothing crazy here, but I think that Breece Hall in the first round could end up absolutely outperforming that ADP of 7.5 that you're seeing on Underdog and the ADP that you see on the Sleeper app at 8.4. So I will go with Breece Hall as my favorite player in the first round of this draft. All right, going into the second round here, a lot of players that I like, a lot of good value. You guys know that I love Devonta Smith, talked about him all off season long. Love Nico Collins, love Saquon Barkley, but I want to talk about somebody a little bit different who fell to the 212 here, and that's Chris Olave, a player that I've seen fall to the end of the second round a lot more frequently lately. ADP of 18.4 on Underdog and ADP of 20.3 on the Sleeper app. And I think some people may be a little shaky about the Saints offense going into next year, but I think Chris Olave in a great spot going into his third year in the league, has still been a wide receiver 2 in the past 2 seasons in full PPR scoring. And really, when you look down the stretch last year, really you look mid-season to the end of the year, Chris Olave was great in full PPR week 6 through week 18 in games he played in just single digits once, and then he missed week 15. So gave you double digits every single one of those games except for 3. And really, when you look on the entire season, single digits, just 5 total times if we're including that week that he did not play in. So overall, it was very consistent last year, had a very good floor on a week in, week out basis, a ceiling of 23.3 fantasy points. I think the Saints offense should improve somewhat in comparison to what it did last year. Still got Alvin Kamara on this offense. You still got Rashid Shaheed as a viable wide receiver 2. Overall, I mean, the Saints offense was shaky last year, but they started to kind of get together mid-season to the end of the year last year. So I think Olave, true wide receiver 1, where he's going in drafts, just a great value. Overall, a player that I'm not afraid to take at the end of the second round. At this value at the 2.12, an absolute great selection. In the third round, once again, some players that I've talked about throughout the offseason that I like. See Derrick Henry gone at pick 26. Do like Michael Pittman, still like Kyron and Cooper Kupp, like pieces of that Rams offense. But ultimately, I want to land on wide receiver DJ Moore with an ADP of 30.8 on Underdog, an ADP of 35.1 on the Sleeper app. And I feel like DJ Moore, who finished as a wide receiver 6 last year in full PPR, a player that was super high on going into last year, one of my most drafted players last year, just kind of being a little bit undervalued going into this coming season. And I think that obviously has to do with Keenan Allen being added to this offense, who I'm not writing off. And then obviously rookie Roma Dunze being drafted. And then the fact that Cole Kmet's still here. Now you got a pass catching back in DeAndre Swift. And then you also have a rookie quarterback. But man, I just think DJ Moore is the clear cut wide receiver one for the Bears. I think Keenan Allen is still going to be good, but I think he kind of falls into more of a wide receiver two position with the Bears. And I mean, I just think DJ Moore is going to have so much value because Caleb Williams is going to have to rely on his wide receiver one, and that is DJ Moore. I mean, the Bears just gave him a nice extension. This is going to be a player who's going to be the focal point of this Bears offense. So if you think that this Bears offense improves this year, that Caleb Williams helps them take that step forward, DJ Moore is the guy here. A great season last year. Did have good chemistry with Justin Fields, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that he can't develop good chemistry with Caleb Williams as well. I just think for where he's going in drafts, just a tremendous value overall. PPR mock drafts, he also goes around this range, end of the third round. I think he's an absolute smash the draft button type of player where he goes. So I love DJ Moore as a tremendous value in the third round. In the fourth round, a lot of players that I like. Love Christian Kirk. You guys have heard me talk about him all off season long. You see some good tight ends, good quarterbacks. I like Zay Flowers. But man, let's talk about Amari Cooper of the Browns. Another player really similar to DJ Moore, who I think, for where he's being drafted, just being completely undervalued, right? ADP of 40.8 on Underdog. Then you go over to the Sleeper app, an ADP of 57.4. So if you're able to draft Amari Cooper as a wide receiver 4, or if you start your, draft a little bit lighter at the wide receiver position, draft him as a wide receiver 2, I think that's okay. When you look at what he did in the past 2 seasons, he's been a wide receiver 2 in fantasy football or a wide receiver 1 in 2022. And last year, still over 1,200 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. Now, some people will look at it and say, well, what if we take away some of that week 16 game where he had a whopping 51.5 fantasy points and like you didn't, progress in the underdog pods if you didn't have Amari Cooper, or he helped you win a fantasy semi-championship and got you to the championship or whatever. Take away some of that game where he had 265 receiving yards. That's fine if you want to look at it that way, but ultimately I think even if you split that game in half, he still finishes as a top 25, 26 wide receiver last year. So you just look at where he's going in drafts right now, in the fourth round, with what Amari Cooper has done in the past couple of years, just a consistent veteran wide receiver who is the guy on his offense. At the time I'm recording this, we have rumors about the Brandon Ayuk potential trade to the Browns. Maybe that involves, Amari Cooper being sent elsewhere, maybe to the Niners, of course, but we'll find out. Let's not overreact to that. Even if that happens, I still think Cooper's an okay value in the fourth round. But if he is with the Browns, then there's just no reason to not smash the draft button in the fourth round on Amari Cooper. 15.1 fantasy points per game last year. Stats are all there. This offense should theoretically improve with a fully healthy full season out of Deshaun Watson, even though what we saw last year wasn't great, but it seems like this offense wants to pass the ball more this year. You got Jerry Jeudy there, got Njoku coming off a good season last year. You got Jerome Ford at the moment as the RB1. Chubb's out. Donta Foreman's hurt, so they're probably going to have to throw the ball more, although there's no knock on Jerome Ford. I do like him. So at the end of the day, I just think Cooper, fourth round, smash the draft button. He's a beautiful value. All right, in the fifth round, once again, a lot of players that I like. You've heard me talk about Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice, Christian Watson, all off season long. I like James Cook. I like Jaden Reed here. Kyle Pitts is good too, but let's talk about Dalton Kincaid at the tight end position, because Dalton Kincaid kind of right outside that top tier of elite tight ends. And most formats right now, you're seeing Laporta, Kelsey, McBride, Andrews as the first 4 off the board, then Kincaid as the 5th. And I think Kincaid with an ADP of 51.5 on Underdog and ADP of 49.7 on Sleeper can finish in front of any of those tight ends this year. I think this is the number 1 receiving option for Josh Allen and for the Buffalo Bills offense going into next year. He has tight end 1 overall potential in my mind. When you look at things when the Bills really started to get going last year and made that change at offensive coordinator, double digits in every game that Kincaid played in except for 4 games. So a very good weekly floor, and still finished with 673 receiving yards off of 73 receptions, 91 targets, and 2 receiving touchdowns. I think all of those numbers improved this year. I don't think it's crazy to say that Kincaid can get close to 1,000 receiving yards and easily score 6 to 8 receiving touchdowns this year. I'm not counting out the combination of Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and Curtis Samuel. I know people like drafting those guys at their ADP. No, James Cook is going to catch passes this year, but Dalton Kincaid has way too much upside that if you can wait till the 5th round and draft him as your tight end one, it's just hard to pass on him. There are other tight ends like Evan Ingram and Jake Ferguson that I'm taking a lot of shares of that I like at their ADP, but Kincaid is just another guy in this range that I feel like has way too much upside. It's going to be the vocal point of the Bills offense, just way too good of a value to pass on in the 5th round. All right, in the 6th round, plenty of good players here. I like Deontay Johnson a lot at pick 62. There's a couple good running backs, and you guys already know who I'm talking about. It's my boy Rachaad White. How can I make a video like this and not mention Rachaad White? I know I've been saying I'm trying to not talk about players I've talked about all off season long in this video, but Rachaad White, ADP is 63 on Underdog. Such a good value. ADP of 39 on Sleeper, and you still see him fall to the end of the 4th, sometimes beginning of the 5th on Sleeper and mock drafts. It blows my mind. This is the RB4 last year, a top 5 running back in full PPR. I'm not worried about Bucky Irving. Last year it was, are you sure Sean Tucker's here? I'm not worried about it. This is the clear workhorse running back for a Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense that hasn't changed since last year, who had a top 10 quarterback in fantasy and Baker Mayfield. You saw what Mike Evans did last year. Chris Godwin's going to improve in the slot this year. I think Jalen McMillan is a nice rookie addition for wide receiver 3. Cade Otton's fine at tight end. This offense hasn't changed except for the fact that head coach Dave Canales is offensive coordinator Dave Canales is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. But man, I don't understand why Rachaad White gets so pushed back in drafts. The other night, I did a best ball mania where Rachaad White nearly went at pick 70. Like, that's crazy to me. I just don't know. The last time I saw a top 5 running back from the season before just get pushed back in ADP like this. I've talked about it all off season long. I'm okay with Rachaad White going this late in drafts because I want to draft Rachaad White. But for me, he's an auto selection when he's on the board in the 6th round. Really, regardless of your build, he's going to be a great value selection going into 2024. Do not forget that I am still running several streams throughout the week where I am hopping into real 2024 fantasy football drafts on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys don't want to wait any longer to draft 2024 fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog has all kinds of different unique contests that you guys can enter, including their flagship Best Ball Mania, where somebody is going to win up to $1.5 million. This is the best way to prepare for the upcoming fantasy football season. These are the sharpest drafts throughout the offseason. Plus, Underdog already has week 1 NFL pick'ems out where you guys can play in their new streaks format and win up to 1,000x your money. Promo code the catch, the link is down below as well. Get you a first time 50% deposit match up to $250 plus a mystery pick'em that you guys can use towards that streaks up to 1,000x your money. Promo code the catch. Don't forget, when you sign up, we'll get you that first time 50% deposit match on Underdog Fantasy. All right, here in the 7th round, a lot of players I like. I like Evan Ingram. I think Kyler Murray, CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, all great values. Love Jameson Williams. But I want to talk about another running back here. That's RAndre Stevenson of the New England Patriots, an ADP of 81.7 on Underdog, ADP of 70.1 on the Sleeper app. And for me, with RAndre Stevenson, when you look at things last year when he was healthy, he hit double digits every game when he was healthy, except for 4. So that's quite good, right? And I think now when you see the extension that the Patriots gave RAndre Stevenson, and whatever happens at quarterback here for the Patriots, we're going to see them rely on the run game and see RAndre Stevenson as a true workhorse running back. Still averaged double-digit fantasy points per game last year. At the end of the day, this is just a workhorse running back that you're getting late in draft. So I like him here in the 7th round as a good value. If you go 0 running back, love RAndre Stevenson as an option. If you go hero running back, I love him. Even if you just want to add depth, get your 3rd running back at this point in the draft in the 7th round, I think RAndre Stevenson is a great overall selection. So maybe not the highest ceiling here, not a part of the best offense in the league, that's for sure. But I think he's going to be heavily relied on and get plenty of touches throughout the year. I'm not really worried about like Antonio Gibson on this roster or anything like that. At the end of the day, I just think where he's going in drafts, he should be selected. So I'll go with RAndre Stevenson in the 7th round. All right, in the 8th round here, I do like Jonathan Brooks. I like Raheem Mostert. I've talked about him a lot throughout the offseason. I think Cortland Sutton, a great selection. Love Jake Ferguson. You guys have heard me talk enough about DeAndre Swift. And we're going to go with another player that you guys have heard me talk a lot about, and that's Zamir White. But he really, just in this range of drafts, is just somebody that I view as a must-draft player. ADP of 88 on the dot on Underdog. ADP of 80.7 on the Sleeper app. And this is your workhorse running back for the Raiders, similar to RAndre Stevenson. Like, go hero running back, 0 running back. Zamir White's the type of guy you want to look for. If you're just adding running back depth, Zamir White, a great value selection, because at the end of the day, there's no one else on this roster that concerns me. As long as Zamir White is healthy, he is the guy for the Raiders. When you look at what he did last year when he was the true RB1, 17.5 fantasy points, 14.5, 15.6. Then in week 18, obviously didn't matter for fantasy, but still 25 touches, 112 rushing yards. So that's 17 or more touches, the ceiling of 25 touches in those 4 games. He had 100 yards from scrimmage in every single one of those games except for week 15, but he still scored a touchdown in that game and had 4.6 yards per carry off of 69 total rushing yards. So Zamir White, I know the offensive situation, like similar to the Patriots with RAndre Stevenson, might kind of worry you. But man, this is just another situation where they're going to have to rely on the RB1 in Zamir White. Plus, we already know the offensive scheme here for the Raiders like goes through an RB being a workhorse. So there's just nothing to worry about where he's going in drafts. Zamir White should be a lock and loaded auto select. Go ahead and start taking him in the 8th round as a tremendous value. All right, looking ahead to the 9th round, see some good quarterback value here. I like Javonte Williams. I like Chase Brown. I think Shaheed's a great pick, but I want to talk about Romeo Doubs. And for me, you guys have heard me all offseason long talk about Christian Watson. I think Jaden Reed is perfectly fine where he's going. I like Dontavion Wicks as a later round selection. I like this Packers offense going into next year. So the reason I want to talk about Romeo Doubs is because I don't feel like anyone's really talking about Romeo Doubs. An ADP of 104.6 on Underdog, ADP of 118.1 on Sleeper, and there's been lots of good buzz around Romeo Doubs in training camp, a lot of good coach speak. These look good in practices. Jordan Love is targeting him in practices, and Jordan Love and Romeo Doubs have had good chemistry going back to games that Jordan Love played in 2022. But last year, especially when the Packers were in the red zone, Jordan Love looked for Romeo Doubs. I mean, and Jordan Love talks a lot about Romeo Doubs, like it has in this past offseason too. A lot of people talk about Jaden Reed, who once again I think is fine. Jaden Reed, 8 touchdowns last year. Romeo Doubs, 8 touchdowns. And I see Jaden Reed get drafted aggressively. I see Christian Watson get drafted aggressively. Then in the later rounds, I see Dontavion Wicks get all the love and praise and get drafted aggressively. Romeo Doubs is like the odd man out here. There's really nothing to not like, and he's the guy who will get pushed back in drafts and in mock drafts. So when you see Romeo Doubs falling, I think he's a great selection to go ahead and take off of the board. Still averaged double digits last year, 10.3 game or fantasy points per game, so nothing crazy high. But once again, the Packers are going to be more in the red zone this year. Josh Jacobs is going to affect that in terms of who scores the touchdowns. I think Jaden Reed, Christian Watson are going to do their thing, especially when Watson is healthy. You guys know how I feel about him. I just think that Romeo Doubs is going to get plenty of red zone targets and opportunities as well. So for where he's going in drafts, especially when you see him falling, give Romeo Doubs some love. I think he absolutely deserves it. All right, moving on to the 10th round. Once again, good quarterback value here. Goddard's okay here. I think Jacoby Myers, there's Dontavion Wicks, Brandon Cooks. I like all those guys where they go. But ultimately, let's talk about a running back, and that's Brian Robinson Jr. ADP of 103.9 on Underdog, ADP of 111.5 on Sleeper. And this is a player who, before things kind of fell off towards the end of the season, was a top 10 running back last year in fantasy football. And you break it down, he gave you single digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in games that he was healthy. Still finished as an RB2 on the season last year. And I do think Austin Eckler is actually a good value where he's going in drafts, but I think Brian Robinson has the higher opportunity or better chance of being a true workhorse running back for the Commanders. And if it is a split with Eckler, who once again, I think Eckler is an okay pick where he goes in terms of his ADP. I still think Brian Robinson Jr. is more like the goal line back, the back who could end up vulturing a lot of touchdowns if Eckler does really step up as running back in this system. But speaking of this system, I like this Cliff Kingsbury offense. I like Jaden Daniels, at quarterback. I like Jahan Dotson as a wide receiver 2. I love Scary Terry, still in his prime. As a wide receiver 1, I think Ben Sinnott is a good rookie tight end, and then behind him is Zach Ertz. So I think this offense can be much improved this year. New offensive system overall. I think Brian Robinson, where he's going in drafts, is just a tremendous value. And I mean, I will say once again, I do like Austin Eckler where he goes in drafts as well. Don't forget about him. Still 1,000 yards from scrimmage last year. And in games he played, he still gave you double-digit performances in 8 of those 14 games. So, I mean, I like both the Commanders running backs, but Brian Robinson, when he's falling this far in drafts, I think you absolutely need to select him. He goes 0 running back, hero running back. This is the type of player you want to look for if you're looking to draft your 4th or your final running back. Brian Robinson is a tremendous value. Love him in the 10th round. All right, looking ahead to the 11th round, you guys have heard me talk about Gus Edwards and Jerome Ford a ton. Goff is fine here, but I think the player who's really rising for me is Josh Downs, an ADP of 131.9 on Underdog, an ADP of 142.1 on the Sleeper app. And so far, in terms of offseason talk, training camp buzz, coach speak, the guy we're hearing the most praise for is Josh Downs. I mean, behind Michael Pittman, in terms of wide receivers for the Colts, this is the player that I think you really need to start drafting. I think AD Mitchell is like okay, but I haven't really seen or heard anything that makes me want to draft AD Mitchell where he's going in comparison to where Josh Downs is going. I think there's every indication that Josh Downs is the wide receiver 2 on this team, and AD Mitchell is the wide receiver 3. So I think AD Mitchell maybe like some upside, and all of that, and he's okay if that's who you want to go with. But I just think Josh Downs, in terms of full PPR, is going to bring a really consistent floor, a good enough ceiling. I think we're going to see him get more involved this year. And there was that point last year, like between weeks 1 and 8, where we really saw Josh Downs on a roll. Single digits just 3 times, a ceiling of 23.5 fantasy points, double digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in that stretch. And then he kind of got banged up, was a little bit hurt. His target share really went down after that week 8 injury. And it just didn't really get back on track. But I think part of that also was the inconsistent quarterback play. And I think at the end of the day now, with a healthy Anthony Richardson, this offense going to improve. Going to see more red zone opportunities. Maybe that leads to more touchdowns for Josh Downs. But it's not really touchdown upside that I'm looking for here. I just think this is a player who really fits in as a nice slot player who is going to be really consistent in full PPR scoring formats. So I'm starting to draft more of him in underdog drafts, but I'm also starting to draft more of him like in PPR mock drafts because he goes really late in both, and I just think he's a great value. So he's a player who's really rising for me, who we're seeing a lot of good buzz around in terms of training camp, coach speak, all that stuff in terms of Colts camp. I think where he goes in drafts, he's absolutely worth the selection. All right, last of all, let's talk about the 12th round. You see some good tight end value here, some good quarterback value here. There's my boy Austin Eckler at running back, but I want to talk about a wide receiver, and that is Jahan Dotson, who I have talked about quite a bit throughout the offseason, but Dotson just another player who I think this year is going to be in a much better situation and can live back up to some of that upside and potential we saw in his rookie season. An ADP of 139 on the dot on Underdog and an ADP of 168.3 on the Sleeper app. So this is a player in your PPR mock drafts you can take one of your last 2 or 3 selections. Player who brings nice upside to your roster, who you can definitely draft as like a wide receiver 5 or 6. So I like Dotson where he's going in drafts. We already talked about why I like this Commanders offense going into next year. And, if you don't feel good about Jaden Daniels as a quarterback, like you're just looking at him as like Anthony Richardson 2.0 or whatever, it's like, well, when you look at what Jaden Daniels did last year in college and at LSU, right? At the end of the day, while the rushing upside was there, and he definitely had plenty of upside in terms of running the football as a quarterback, and the stats show that. Stats also show that he threw the football a ton, and he could throw the football down the field as well. So I think Jahan Dotson is really going to benefit from that. And when you look at Dotson last year, it was definitely disappointing. Do not get me wrong. I was high on Dotson going into last year after his rookie season because when he played in 12 games in his rookie season, you saw better touchdown upside at 7 total touchdowns. But the receiving yards and receptions weren't too bad last year, still 10.5 yards per catch. So he kind of has that big play capability. The touchdowns were down at just 4 touchdowns and inconsistent throughout the season. I think that this whole offense is going to be more consistent this year. I think that is going to be a good thing for Jahan Dotson. I just think he's a nice kind of upside play as like your wide receiver 6, whether you're in a redraft format or a best ball format. So like where he's going in drafts, I think he's worth the selection in the 12th round. And that'll do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy the content today or find it helpful, be sure to join the community by hitting that subscribe button down below. If you guys have any fantasy football questions, redraft, dynasty, or best ball, drop them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And of course, let me know what you thought about today's video, about these players. Who are you guys targeting in these rounds? Do you like these players on today's list? Who would you have rather drafted? All that good stuff. Be sure to join our free Discord as well. That'll let you guys know when I'm going live, when I'm hopping into Underdog Drafts live, or when we were throwing together community mock drafts that you guys can join and come practice for your upcoming fantasy football leagues as well. So with that, I will say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.